Hello. In this week's Torah portion, Matot, the Israelites are at the gates of the Promised Land. All they need to do is cross the Jordan River. But the tribes of Reuben and Gad want to settle east of Jordan because that land is ideal for grazing and they have plenty of livestock. Moses is incensed because he counted on all Israel working together to fight and settle in the Promised Land. He tells the two tribes, "Shall your brothers go to war while you stay here?" He reminds them that God may well decide to cancel the entire Promised Land project on account of them, as he almost did many times. In the end, they reach a compromise. The two tribes would be allowed to settle east of the Jordan with their families, but the men would go into the Promised Land and fight with the rest of the Israelites in the front line until everybody is also fully settled. Only then could they go back to their families. This is an early example of Jewish conflict resolution. It is different from a court decision in which one side loses and one side wins. It strives to make both sides win, or one win and the other not lose, or both not lose. Let's now examine 7 principles on which our tradition approaches this subject. First, compromise. Moses would have preferred that the two tribes settle in the Holy Lands, and the two tribes would have preferred to avoid fighting. The Talmud says, quote, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korha said, "It is a mitzvah to compromise, as it is stated in Zechariah, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates. Which is the judgment that has peace within it? You must say it is compromise. That is, trying for both sides to be reasonably satisfied." The Mishnah elaborates, quote, "The world stands on 3 foundations, on justice, on truth, and on peace." Maimonides summarizes, "It is a mitzvah for the courts to tell the parties at the beginning, do you want strict justice, that is din, or compromise, that is peshara? A court that always practices compromise is praiseworthy. However, this is before the verdict. Once the verdict is rendered and it is decided that one is innocent and one is liable, you may not compromise. Rather, let justice pierce the mountain." Unquote. The Maharsha from 16th century Poland notes a critical difference. Compromise is arrived at with the agreement and willingness of both parties, which is not the case with judgment. However, some point out that compromise can be unfair if it involves intimidation and threats, and a court decision is then preferable. Others point out that the court decision engenders bitterness in the losing sides. Second, inform. The above story does not end here. When they returned to their homes east of the Jordan, the tribes of Reuben and Gad built, quote, "a great conspicuous altar," unquote. This was prohibited because the Mishkan, the tabernacle, had already been built and none other was allowed. The other tribes were incensed and prepared for civil war, fearing Israel would split in 2 nations as a result of this action. Quote, "Thus said the whole community of the Lord, what is this treachery that you have committed this day against the God of Israel, turning away from the Lord, building yourselves an altar, and rebelling this day against the Lord?" Unquote. But the Israelite first sent Pinchas, who distinguished himself earlier by his zealotry. He told them that God might well punish all of Israel for their sin. The tribes of Reuben and Gad responded, quote, "We did this thing only out of our concern that in time to come, your children might say to our children, 'What have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel?' So we decided to build an altar, not for burnt offering or other sacrifices, but as a witness between you and us and between the generations to come. We reasoned, if your children should speak thus to us and to our children in time to come, we would reply, 'See the replica of the Lord's altar, which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings or sacrifices, but as a witness between you and us. Far be it from us to rebel against the Lord or to turn away this day from the Lord.' Pinchas approved. The Israelites were pleased, and they spoke no more of going to war against them. unquote. The lesson is, make sure the sides have all relevant facts and are aware of all relevant emotions and motivations before proceeding. Third, make sure no one loses. Jewish law considers an outcome permissible when ze nehene veze lo haser. This one gains and that one does not lose. Nobody must lose, but it's acceptable if only one side gains. Fourth, lie. Lying is permitted for the sake of peace. Aaron, Moses' brother, was a lover and pursuer of peace and did not hesitate to lie to achieve it. Witness this story in the Talmud. Quote, when two people had a dispute, Aaron went and sat near one of them and said to him, my son, see what your friend is doing. He's beating his heart and tearing his clothing, saying, woe is me. How can I lift up my eyes and look at my friend? I'm ashamed of myself since I was the one who offended him. Aaron would sit with him until he removed the hatred from his heart. Aaron would then go and sit next to the other one and say to him, quote, my son, see what your friend is doing. He's beating his heart and tearing his clothing, saying, woe is me. How can I lift up my eyes and look at my friends? I'm ashamed of myself, since I was the one who offended him. Aaron would sit with him until he removed the hatred from his heart. When the two met, they would hug and kiss each other, unquote. The lesson here is that peace is the ultimate goal of conflict resolution, and it is usually helpful to use a mediator. Also, two things are allowed here which would not be allowed in courts: hold separate meetings to achieve your goal, and tell white lies that do not hurt anybody. In general, Moses put the law above all else, and Aaron put peace above all else. Aaron even helped make the golden calf to buy time until Moses came down from the mountain to avoid a civil war. Fifth, make sure your cause is worthy. The Mishnah says, every dispute that is for the sake of heaven will endure in the end, but one that is not for the sake of heaven will not endure. What is a controversy that is for the sake of heaven? The controversy between Hillel and Shammai. And which is a controversy that is not for the sake of heaven? The controversy between Korach and his entire congregation, unquote. Sixth, consider the opponent's arguments. The other side's arguments must be considered and respected. We learn in the Talmud that Hillel prevailed against Shammai just because his disciples were kind and humble and always quoted the other side's opinions before their own. Quote, Rabbi Abba stated in the name of Shmuel, for 3 years there was a dispute between the followers of Shammai and those of Hillel. The first saying the halakha agrees with us, and the second also saying the halakha agrees with us. Then a heavenly voice, a bat kol, was heard saying, Ellu ve'ellu divrei Elokim hayim. These and these are the words of the living God, but the halakha agrees with Bet Hillel. However, since both are the words of the living God, what was it that entitled Bet Hillel to have the halakha agree with them? Because they were kind and modest and studied both their own rulings and those of Bet Shammai, and were even so humble as to mention the opinions of Bet Shammai before their own, unquote. The logic was sound in both camps, so God sided with the humble and considerate side, who tried to understand the emotions of the other side. Seventh and last, don't let the dispute become personal. The dispute is not a personal matter, and the sides must not let it spoil their personal relationship. The Talmud tells us that this was the case with Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. Quote, although Bet Hillel prohibited certain things and Bet Shammai permitted them, Bet Shammai did not refrain from marrying women from Bet Hillel, nor did Bet Hillel refrain from marrying women from Bet Shammai. Even though they sometimes disagreed on ritual purity, they did not refrain from handling ritually pure objects with one another, unquote. Jewish conflict resolution puts peace above all else. It values truth and making sure the cause is worthy. It recommends settling out of court, possibly with a mediator. It advises to compromise, inform, and even tell white lies if necessary. It makes sure neither side loses anything. It exhorts us to consider our opponent's arguments and not let the dispute become personal. Shabbat Shalom.